Welcome back to the Chad AC Show on News Talk KFYO. Joining us on the phones right now to get an idea of what's happening with at least our power here in Lubbock. Matt Rose, Public Affairs, Government Relations Manager. Matt Rose, good morning. How are you today?
I'm good. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you okay. I appreciate you joining us today. It's I'm sure things at LP&L have been quite interesting over this weekend. Walk folks through, I guess, what's happening at LP&L and how at least things are holding up on our side.
Sure. Well, this has unquestionably been an historic storm. Everybody has been able to witness that, unfortunately, the last few days. Here in Lubbock, if you look through the weekend, all of our facilities held very well. I think the fact that, we talked about on your show in the past, we now have these additional transmission lines that have been completed and locked in internal to our system has kind of given us more bandwidth. One of the biggest issues when you have a storm like this is just making sure you have the ability to evenly distribute electricity throughout the grid. And we've been able to do that. Last night, we just absolutely demolished our record for winter peak. And so, we were certainly concerned going into the evening on how the system was going to hold. But even though we had record usage last night, everything held. We didn't have substation lockouts or transmission lines go out. So from that end, it's been very positive up to this point. When you look down south and you look to the east into the ERCOT market, obviously the fact that they're in a position now where they're starting to take rotating outages is dominating the headlines. But one of the things that I want really to kind of drive home to folks is that, these two storms, but taking them as one, it has brought record low temperatures and snow and some wind to Lubbock. But when you look elsewhere in the state, especially down in central Texas, they've also gotten a lot of ice. And so where ERCOT has run into challenges is that they've had transmission lines go out of service because there's been so much ice in those regions that's taken out some of those lines. And so that's been one of the really big issues. But where we stand today is that, we haven't connected to the ERCOT grid yet. That's coming up, here in a few months. But you have what's called Energy Emergency Alerts, EEA. And there's three stages. There's 1, 2, and 3. Stage 1, we've been in that kind of throughout the weekend, and that is basically just everybody kind of watch what you're doing, watch your systems. If there's any problems, let us know. If you can conserve, please do so. And we had some large commercial customers here that went down, not necessarily because of us, but because of the natural gas curtailment that's been going on.
Right.
So we were helped a little bit by that. You then get to level 2, and level 2 is where ERCOT was yesterday afternoon, evening, which is where they send a call out and they say, okay, this is getting serious. We need everybody to please do what they can to conserve. And that's where you saw those like turn your thermostats down, turn off excess lights, those things. And then this morning, they moved into that critical third stage. Well, right now, I'm about to put a press release out to say that the Southwest Power Pool has moved into that EEA2 zone, which is where ERCOT was yesterday. So we're not completely immune to it here. We just haven't had quite as much damage as they've had down south with the ice. So we'll be putting out a call today urging people to voluntarily conserve everywhere they can. We don't necessarily see an issue with our local grid here, but we also want to make sure that we support the regional grid because if they have issues, it's going to affect us too, as the way it kind of works.
And LP&L is still on the Southwest Power Pool, correct?
Yes, sir. We're still on the SPP, still on the Southwest Power Pool. And so, it just shows you that this storm has really affected everybody, not just in Texas, but in this region of the country. We just haven't seen the ice necessarily on our side of the line like they've seen down in Central and East Texas.
Is there a chance that the Southwest Power Pool may move into that EEA 3?
There is, if they reach a point like ERCOT did, where it shows that their reserve capacity has fallen to a critical level, and that's where ERCOT was yesterday. ERCOT, just like SPP, they have the ability to strike a strategic generation reserve power plants, and they're going to utilize that. SPP will utilize it too if necessary. Rotating outages is really the thing that you get to where you are sitting there saying, we need to take momentary outages around the system to make sure that we don't have a cascading blackout or further damage. Unfortunately, ERCOT reached that point of having to pull that lever, early in the AM hours. We're hoping that SPP does not have to, but that's why we're going to put that call out today to say, let's do our part, even though the grid here in Lubbock looks strong. Let's do our part because, everybody's going to need whatever capacity is out there to get us, through the next 24 hours at least.
Well, it seems, if memory serves right, there wasn't that much time between when ERCOT put out that EEA 2 and EEA 3. At least on social media, it came across like within an hour of each other. So hopefully that doesn't happen here, because you keep and you do keep mentioning that Lubbock's grid is fine. If the Southwest Power Pool says, "Hey, we're moving to EEA 3," would Lubbock possibly get lumped into rolling blackouts?
We could, if we get to that point. We could, and when you look at the United States is cut up into these large electrical grids that are run by these nonprofit agencies, ERCOT being one and SPP being the other. Here for us that kind of make it that matter. But the rules are going to be a little bit different. But right now we buy power from XL Energy or Southwestern Public Service. And they have certainly put out calls and asked us to help in the calls for conservation. Because, again, what happens on one section of the grid can affect somebody in another section of the grid. So you're all kind of trying to be in there together to work together to maintain the security of the grid. And hopefully it doesn't get to that point. Like I say, we've not seen the ice dilemmas that they've seen. And I keep mentioning that just simply because as we watched it yesterday, you think of these high power transmission lines as intersecting roadways, and so if you have an incident, say a car wreck on an interstate highway that shuts down that highway, it causes congestion. Things get backed up, and people can't get through. Electrons are the same way. If you have a major transmission line go down because of ice, it restricts the pathways that the electrons can run through, and that's when you start getting to these points of saying, okay, we're going to have to do something here to make sure that we can evenly distribute across the grid. So much of what we've seen the last, 2 days, and we'll see in the day going forward, is really, in my mind, less an issue of planning and more just an issue of these are the coldest temperatures we've seen in 40 years.
Yeah.
And the last time ERCOT had to take rotating outages was almost exactly 10 years ago. It was in 2011. It happened right before the Super Bowl when it was in Dallas. But same sort of deal. Giant storm came and just sat over Central Texas for 3 straight days. But in that instance, they had power plants that were down for scheduled maintenance, and then they had other power plants that were up and running but failed. After that incident, the legislature sat down. They really revamped their protocols and procedures. And so now, when you come into winter storms, their generators are not allowed to be out for maintenance. Everybody has to be online. So that part of it's working fine. It's just the fact that this storm has been so damaging to infrastructure. They've lost some critical facilities, it's just kind of the nature of it.
Yeah.
I hate to say these things out loud. I'm knocking on wood as I do, since we haven't had any issues, but that's what we've been monitoring, and we'll keep watching pretty closely.
All right, two more things before I let you go, and I do appreciate you taking some time, and I know you got to get that press release out soon. One, are we still on track to join ERCOT in June of 2021?
Yes, we are. We are. Right now we're in the process of completing the transmission lines that stretch outside of our system to connect to the ERCOT grid. And those are scheduled to be completed on time. But what's really helped us during this storm is the fact that, if you look around the city, look on 82nd Street, those tall brown kind of rust-colored poles that run down 82nd and then cut through the middle of town, and then you see them up on the North Loop next to Burl-Hoffman Park. Those are all our new, larger internal transmission lines that used to be 69,000 volts and are now 115,000 volts. So part of what's been so successful this weekend for us is having those new lines in service and being able to move electricity across the grid evenly.
All right, and as you said, I guess this would be the breaking news: LP&L and Southwest Power Pool moving to the EEA2 category. What do customers need to do in order to conserve power?
I'm sorry, you broke up there for just a second. I apologize.
LP&L and SPP moving to the EEA2 category. What do customers need to do to I guess, reduce power usage?
Okay, it's very similar to what they've issued down south, right? It is, if at all possible, set your thermostats to 68 degrees. Suspend use of electrical appliances like dishwashers, washing machines, clothes dryers. Turn off televisions or electronic equipment that's not necessary. Unplug things that are not in use. Turn off any unnecessary lighting. The other thing I would say too is that you can close all your blinds in the house to keep, your windows from letting out the warm air. But if we've got some sun, keep your blinds open, direct them to the floor, because that'll heat up the room. But anything you can do to just minimize your usage is going to help overall. Again, right now, it's not mandatory. It's just a strong urging of conservation so that we don't have to move into that territory. But I think if we all do this, I think we should get through this and be just fine. But we've still got about a day's left of this really nasty weather.
All right, Matt Rose with LP&L. We'll let you get that press release out. We do appreciate you joining us and letting us know how everything's going.
Absolutely. And just one very last thing that I'll throw out, because I've gotten some calls about this. Please understand that at this point in time, we are not taking rotating outages, but I've had people report that they've not lost power, but they've had blinks, or the power's gone up and down, and they've been afraid this has something to do with what we've been talking about. It doesn't. That's just the nature of, we've got a lot of equipment out there that's under a lot of stress, and sometimes it can cause your power to blink. That has nothing to do with what's going on in ERCOT or the calls for conservation. Just please know that that's something separate to do with the weather and not us for the moment.
All right, very good. Matt, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, that's Matt Rose with LP&L.